Welcome, listeners, to the Real Talk podcast, where we talk about everything movies and TV related. Coming to you from the CHS Today studio on this brisk October morning, today as we take a dive into Gotham City in the 2019 film Joker. Accompanying me today, three other talkers. Across from me, Arthur, and across from him, Cordell. To my right, Grady. Grady, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Grady. This was my first time watching Joker 2019. I thought it was a very interesting and intriguing movie. I liked a lot of the scenes in the movie. My favorite genre is probably comedy. Step Brothers is a very good, ideal comedy movie for me.
Arthur, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Arthur. I normally like watching action movies. Like, I like a lot of the DC movies, but I hadn't gotten around to watching this one yet, so this was my first time watching it, but overall I thought it was a pretty good movie. Yeah.
Cordell?
So I'm not really into DC a lot, but this is actually my third time watching this movie. Very, good, dive into the mental part of the Joker's character within this movie.
Yeah, and my name is Brandt Lykins, and this was my second time watching. The first time I watched it, I didn't really understand a lot of it, as we all know. Very confusing, very dramatic. But, normally not my cup of tea, typically, this kind of movie. Usually more into more action or comedy. As Grady said, Step Brothers, great movie. So we're going to go ahead and go into our first segment, which we like to call Archives. So this segment, we're going to go into detail about, the history of the movie, some of the accomplishments that happened after its release, and kind of the build-up to the creation of the film itself. So, actually, it all starts back in 2016. Todd Phillips, the director of the Joker movie, and the newest one that just came out, Joker Folie à Deux, he pitched the original idea of the Joker movie after he directed a movie called War Dogs in 2016 to Warner Bros. And it was officially announced shortly after in 2017. Actually began production in September of 2018 and then was later released in October 2019. So, Cordell, you got anything over that?
Over the history of the movie?
Yeah, just some things about the movie.
Well, I mean, it did extremely well in the box office. It's I think second highest film.
R-rated, yeah.
Yes.
And I believe it actually was the first R-rated film to gross over $1 billion. So obviously that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, so this movie also had quite a few awards that were given to it. Like, it had a lot of Academy Awards, and the critics liked it a lot. It had a couple of Golden Globes, and it was the best, or it got the Grammy Award for Best Score.
And yeah, Joaquin Phoenix actually ended up winning Best Actor for that film. So, a lot of history with this movie. Very different kind of DC the movie than what we're used to. Actually, Todd Phillips said in an interview, we wanted to make a different type of comic book movie, one that was more grounded and gritty and less about the spectacle. So, I mean, I feel like it's kind of a hit at Marvel movies and bigger DC movies. I mean, not a hit, but they just wanted to do something that wasn't the norm, something that was going to make an impact, not just, some crappy movie like Eternals, bro. I mean, that's a big spectacle movie, but is it good? No.
Kind of like Cordell said earlier, I like how this one was a good take on, kind of like you said, it wasn't really a mainstream, Joker movie, but it was a really good take on, the Joker's mindset and his development.
And, they did not, I think their budget was $50 to $60 million for this. So, obviously, an insane profit from that, so.
Yeah, the whole point about that is that everyone was thinking that the movie was going to be bad because when you have the Joker, it's always associated with the Batman,
Yeah.
So that's why everyone thought that this movie was going to be bad, because it's not about the Joker, it's about the human person, Arthur Fleck.
Mhm.
You're seeing like the human side of Joker when he's always this like villain and a monster, you know?
Yeah. And, I think that's a perfect way to end off this segment and go into our next, which is plot and story. So, guys, in this segment, all we're going to be really doing is giving a brief overview of, the plot and story of the film. And actually, the film starts off with the man himself, Arthur Fleck, standing in the street, spinning a sign in front of a store. And, this first scene, I think, kind of shows what the entire movie is going to be about. You see him on the side of the street spinning the sign. He gets mugged, and then he gets mugged, and, you can see he's having a rough time, and he goes back to his job, gets reprimanded for losing the sign that was broken, stolen from him. You can't do anything about it. And you can see the lack of love in his life, And throughout the movie, a few times, Arthur, you can see, is in therapy for mental illness, and he's prescribed many medications, and we're just gonna cut the spaces out. It's fine. And he talks about his dream of pursuing a career in stand-up comedy, and I think that's kind of ironic. Obviously, the Joker, which is comic accurate, by the way. In the comics, Joker did want to be a stand-up comedian. Obviously, it didn't work very well. He has a condition, actually, to where he can't stop laughing. So, I mean, it's I feel like it kind of adds to the character of Arthur Fleck and the Joker in a new perspective. So,
I think they incorporated his condition in a very creative way into the movie to make him seem almost more psychotic in a sense of the way, because it always happened in his card that he gives people says uncontrollable or whatever, but it always seems to happen whenever there's some sense of urgency or a different
like in a nervous situation.
Yeah, like an emotion that he would be feeling in the moment.
Yeah, Cordell, you got anything over there?
Yeah. This is actually one of the acting parts about that rewards and all the stuff he got. He was studying people with actual mental problems to try and imitate the laugh, just like how they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, it worked pretty well.
I feel like during the movie, we got to see a lot of parts of Gotham City that usually aren't shown in Batman. Throughout the Batman movies, you don't really see the poverty or the struggle that happens in Gotham City and the people. Yeah.
And, obviously, as Grady just said, you don't really see the struggle. And, the struggle that you see here in the beginning, he gets fired from his job. This is his only job. He actually liked that job. So it's kind of sad to see. And then we see his mother, who's sick. He's taking care of his mom. She doesn't work. So he's the man of the house. He is the one who is relied on to take care of his mother, who he loves dearly at the time. So we'll get into that later. So, yeah. And after, he gets fired from his job, what happens, Cordell? Why don't you tell us all about that?
So pretty much after he got fired, he went to see his therapist, and as you said earlier, we can see that he's not well at all. It states that he is on 7 different prescription drugs, and he also wants more. He's on 7, and he says that he just still feels bad. He says himself that he doesn't want to feel bad anymore.
Yeah. And, obviously at this point in the movie, we understand that Arthur has some mental issues, but we don't dive into why until later. And after he sees his therapist, after he gets fired, Mr. Arthur Fleck is on a train. And on this train, sees, I believe it's three young men harassing this woman. And in that nervous, emotional feeling, he
Mm.
begins to laugh. He starts laughing, and these men, these Wall Street-looking guys, come over to him, and they start beating him up, harassing him. And then, little do they know, Arthur Fleck has a gun, shoots them in the train, side of the street. Becomes a huge story.
That he was given by one of his coworkers.
Yeah,
right?
actually, one of the employees at the clown place or whatever gave it to him. So basically, Arthur shoots these men, and it becomes a huge news story. And throughout the film, you know, we can kind of see his mental illness through his delusion of life. You know, we see his this is completely and utterly incorrect fantasies. We see he takes every interaction with anything really that could be positive, and he turns it into a world that doesn't exist. We see this when he's performing at a comedy club, and he's telling his jokes, and he imagines everyone sitting there laughing, having a great time. But then later in the film, we find out it's not at all what happened. As we see his favorite show, is it Andy Murray show?
I
Murray
believe so.
Murray Franklin.
That's right.
The
yeah.
Murray Franklin show, the fictional talk show
Mhm.
in the world of the Joker. And he sees on TV that they play his clip from that. And he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. This is crazy. They played my video on the show. And there's a lot of buzz around this video. And he doesn't really know how to feel because he was quite obviously being made fun of for being unfunny. So I think that kind of sends him into a spiral. As not only that, but the media surrounding the murder of what we find to be the Wayne Enterprise employees. And so, if you don't know, Wayne Enterprise, run by Arthur, tell us.
Thomas Wayne.
Thomas Wayne.
Which I think that these three coworkers that were, I mean, clearly not the greatest of people, like harassing the woman or whatever, did a really good job of portraying how in some of the Batman movies you always subtly hear like in the background that like Thomas Wayne was the one like ruining the city or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even though Wayne Enterprises was one of the biggest corporations there at the time. Yeah. And I think this did a really good job of like portraying that before Batman grew up or whatever.
Like, it's good, like, showing how later stating in the movie, pretty much the rich have all the power.
Yeah.
And they're just throwing the poor, the poverty, the people living in these bad situations under the bus, and no one, like, no, like, television points that out or anything. And it just, like, shows how all the rich and powerful do not care about the people living in the slums of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And through this process, Arthur decides to open a letter that his mother is sending to Thomas Wayne. And in this letter, Penny Fleck is claiming Thomas Wayne is the father of her child, Arthur Fleck. Now, obviously, he's shocked about this. He's a little concerned, gets upset. So he decides to take a stroll to the Wayne Manor. Grady, can you tell us what happens when he gets there?
When he gets there, Arthur explains Yeah, I see it.
Do you want me to do it?
I got it. When Arthur gets to Wayne Mansion and child Bruce Wayne walks up, Arthur performs magic to him and does the smile fingers.
So yeah, basically, Arthur, comes up to the front gate of the house, and we see a child. That child, they can't. I don't think
They did say it was Bruce
They
Wayne.
said Bruce.
Alfred.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I believe it was when Alfred
said,
came up. He was the only one that actually called him by name. Bruce.
So nice little reference there. I don't think they have the right to say Batman in the movie though. They can't.
No.
Obviously, they
So,
wouldn't because it doesn't exist. But
It's not, yeah.
I know in the new one, I haven't seen yet which we may cover on this podcast one day. Yeah, stay tuned. I don't know the story, but I know they weren't allowed to say that. So, when he gets to the manor, basically, the whole point of that is Alfred tells him that his mother adopted him, or not that they. Crap. We'll cut that. We'll cut that. Alfred tells him that his mother was crazy, a lunatic, and that's why she.
Was like fired.
Yeah,
something
she
like
was
that.
fired. She worked for Wayne Enterprises at the time, before Arthur was born. So, Arthur decides to do some digging. Pulls out his mother's records. Turns out, he was adopted. Now,
Mhm.
you can obviously see some trauma here. So,
About like the woman that he thought was his mother for
Yeah.
so long that he like cared for when she was clearly ill, and like at her house got her medication while he was taking his and everything. Yeah.
yeah, so obviously we can see that takes a toll on him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know how to, he knows how to feel, but we don't know how he's going to react or what he's going to do. So, from there, he, his mother's in the hospital, and he suffocates her with a pillow
Mhm.
out of anger and rage. Now, this is where things get crazy. So, Cordell, do you want to talk about the Franklin Murray show and how all that kind of went?
So pretty much what happened in the Franklin Murray show, and actually before this, there was her neighbor Sophie.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't talk.
The supposed, we'll get there.
The
This love interest, quotes around that.
Here, I'll restate what I said. So, what happened on the Murray Franklin show was that Murray Franklin pretty much just decided to play Arthur.
You're good.
It sounds like.
Don't cup it. Don't cup it. Maybe just get kind of close. It's not going to be as good because it doesn't have the cover.
Right. So, pretty much. Do you hear that?
Yeah, it's fine.
So, pretty much what happened on the Murray Franklin show was that Arthur Fleck, whenever he was doing the stand-up, they just play. We already talked about this. They played his video, and he was just laughing to himself. And, he was thinking that everyone was laughing about his jokes, but that's not true because he was daydreaming about that. So, Murray Franklin decides to invite Arthur onto the show, and whenever they're like backstage, he says, title, says introduce him as Joker. So he comes out and he like kisses the lady or whatever.
Oh yeah,
Or,
the
Yeah.
introduction. Yeah.
and he sits down and he pretty much like he goes on telling jokes.
About drunk driving and people dying, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously they're mad.
Yeah, they're a little
about
upset.
that. So and then he decides to give another joke, and he confesses to killing the 3 Wall Street guys
Yeah.
on the train.
And I think, sorry to interrupt, but that whole segment, he says, if it was me lying on the side of the street, you would walk right over me and never even notice me. I think that kind of sums up, Todd Phillips actually said that, like, they wanted to take a different take on the Joker. It was a movie about lack of love in the world and how the world doesn't care about you. So I think that perfectly shows,
And then it builds up like his resentment towards Thomas Wayne after finding out that that's not even his dad. or
Yeah.
anything. Calling Penny Fleck a lunatic and stuff.
Mhm.
And then he proceeds to say, like, right after that, him lying on the sidewalk, he says, but because, like, people like Thomas Wayne cry about them on TV,
Makes them
he's
important.
showing everyone that he has a problem with Thomas Wayne, which we'll get about later into the riots and what happens to Thomas Wayne.
Yeah. So, obviously, he goes on this whole rant, and then he shoots Franklin Murray in the head on live television. So that's kind of terrible. And directly after this, for those of you who don't know, sorry, we kind of left this out, but the whole clown movement of him killing those Wall Street guys led to a citywide movement, of we hate Thomas Wayne, he should not be mayor.
Yeah.
So the riots are going on, and that killing of Franklin Murray amplifies it. He gets arrested, and then someone crashes into the cop car, frees him. The riots begin, and then we see what some would say as the birth of Batman himself. Thomas Wayne and his wife were murdered in front of that innocent little boy. So, obviously, the origin of Batman in that. So that was a nice little. That's probably. Well, we'll get to that later, but not the point. So that's pretty much the whole story of the movie. I mean, at the end, you see him at some insane asylum running around,
Yeah.
and then it just says the end. So that's pretty much it. But, that's not the end of this podcast. We're not done yet. That was kind of a long segment, really long, but it's time to transition into our third segment, character analysis. In this segment, we're going to go around the table. We're going to talk about favorite characters, least favorite characters, and, just characters worth mentioning. So, Grady, you want to go ahead and start us off?
I'd probably have to say my favorite character. This might be I'd probably have to say that my favorite character. This might be a pretty basic answer, but it'd have to be Arthur.
Yeah, makes
I
sense.
just like the character build-up and how his background is really linked throughout the story, and how we find over time more and more pieces, and how even in the slightest ways it kind of seems like his adoptive mother and him have a very close connection in the way that their lives are going so far.
Yeah.
like a very similar mindset type almost.
Yeah, and I'd have to say my least favorite character is probably Thomas Wayne.
Ooh.
He just
Wow.
seems like not a good person in
Yeah.
every way that he is shown during this. It just doesn't add up for me, and I don't like it.
Arthur, how about you?
I don't know. I think I would have to say that my favorite. I don't know. I'd almost say it would be the three. Yeah, sorry. No, we're gonna have to cut this out.
Yeah.
For I'd say my favorite character would probably be either the three guys that were in the subway,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
his clown coworker guy,
Ah.
like the
Ah,
Which
yeah.
one?
I-
Randall or Gary?
I forget his name, like the real little one.
Oh, Gary. Yeah, that's my
Gary,
guy.
yeah.
Love that, man.
I think that he did a really good job of even though he showing that the Joker was clearly going psycho, and Arthur kept getting in trouble and reprimanded at work. I think he was a good, almost sort of comedic relief.
Yeah, he put a smile on your face. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, he always had something to say that was funny.
What about your least favorite there, Arthur?
I'd say my least favorite. I don't know, probably. Probably Penny.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
We'll get.
I know she had
I'll tell you how I
yeah.
feel in a minute.
Yeah, I know she had a big role in the movie, but I don't know. Something about her, I just didn't really care for her character
Yeah.
development and stuff. But I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's a good
So
point.
I'm gonna add to that. My favorite character overall, just because it's such a relief in the movie. I know Arthur already said it, but I'm going with Gary. Gary is such a kind
Yeah.
soul. I mean, I know, man, he doesn't play a big role, but he just makes me happy. And that's okay. That's all
Yeah,
right.
in a sad
He
movie.
doesn't have this big arc. He's just a simple little side character. Least favorite, Penny Fleck. I hate her. She's the worst. She's just insane, and which is part of her character. I get it, but she's also just annoying. Just shut up. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Cordell, how about you?
Guys, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know who my favorite character is.
Just think of someone. We'll cut this out.
Should I just say Arthur? Or should I just?
Yeah, just say it.
Basic. All right. Also basic. Also Grady's answer. I would have to go with Arthur Fleck, because the way that Joaquin Phoenix played him as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
Just makes him such an amazing character for this mental side. that
Yeah.
we see of the Joker.
And he lost a ton of weight to do this, so it was kind of crazy.
Yeah. Least favorite character, right?
Yeah.
My least favorite character or characters, which I'm leading up to, probably the three Wall Street guys,
Ooh,
because
a little bit of contrast here.
they just decided to attack Arthur for no reason.
Yeah.
And I mean, you obviously see that they're not good people, you can see that they're trying to harass this woman on the train, and Arthur is obviously like having some mental problems. I mean, he's laughing to himself, so they just decide to start laughing at him, and they instigate the killing of them.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap up this segment. Now we're going to go into our fourth, which we like to call the goods. The goods is just a segment where we're going to go around and just tell about our favorite specific part of the movie. So, Grady, you want to go ahead and get us started off there?
I'd have to say that my favorite part of the movie was probably when he was on the train and he meets the Wayne Enterprise workers.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the biggest turning points.
Yeah,
So.
because I feel like that really describes what the movie's pointing at and how these people who have money are really oblivious to the people who are struggling in the poverty. So I'd say that's probably my favorite scene of the movie.
I'd say one of my favorite scenes was probably closer to the beginning when he was shown at the children's hospital.
Oh, with the gun?
Yeah, when the
Yeah,
gun fell out.
yeah.
That was funny.
Fell out of his suit or whatever. Because I think that was one of the first times, kind of like Grady said, it really showed how, I guess not, but it kind of showed how he felt almost vulnerable. Like once he realized that the gun was a source of protection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cordell, how about you?
My favorite scene that we ended up not talking about was probably the same guy who gave him that gun that he dropped in the children's hospital,
Yep.
Randall. Probably whenever him and Gary are at his house and Arthur Fleck actually murders Randall,
Yeah.
honestly kind of brutally, but he leaves Gary alive.
Yeah, because Gary was nice. Gary was nice to him, yeah.
Even helps him.
That's why he's the best character in the movie. So, my favorite bit of the movie, which we kind of briefly discussed, when you really see how his life is just a big fantasy. It goes through bits of the movie that you thought were real, which you see. He thought that he was in a relationship with his neighbor, when truly they talked once. She was never there at all. As you see, it flashes through it, so.
And there's even a scene about that, an entire, couple-minute segment where he's literally following her around the entire Gotham City.
So that's all for that segment. Now we're going to move into our fifth and final segment called Final Thoughts. So basically, we're just going to go around, give our final thoughts, give our overall rating of the film. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. I thought this film was great. It was new. It was something fresh that, we've never really seen before. So I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 clown masks. So yeah. Arthur, how about you?
I don't know. I again kind of like how it was something different, something you don't always see every day.
Yeah.
And how it was kind of like a backstory. So I think overall it's going to be about a 3.5 out of 5 clown masks.
Cordell?
I very cinematic shots, very amazing acting, very good mental portrayal of this character that we usually don't get to see. So give me 4.5 clown masks out of 5.
Wow. All right. That's the highest one yet. Grady?
As a person who doesn't usually watch DC or Marvel movies, I thought this was a great first one to start with.
Yeah.
And a great way to bring a background into both the Joker and Bruce Wayne's life.
Yeah.
And I really liked the build-up of Joker over the movie. So I'm going to give it 4.5 clown masks out of 5.
All right. Well, I think this was a pretty successful episode, It's our first one. There's some rough patches, but that's okay. So that is all the time we have today. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode. Tune in next week for more Real Talk.